Hi everyone, this is Liam from the editing room. Our conversation with Max A was one of the first that we ever recorded, so we had a little hiccup with the sound quality. Unfortunately, Max and Mouse sound a little bit robot-like. We are only making these videos as a side project and a hobby rather than a full-time professional endeavour. We apologise for the low quality, but I hope you still find some enjoyment and insight from the podcast.
I'm ecstatic if an opponent brings in or casts Extract against me.
7 million.
7.
7 Point Highlander. Hello and welcome to the 7 Point Cast. My name is Liam and I'm joined here by my co-host Mouse.
Okay, glad to be here.
And today we'll be speaking with Max A, better known as SaltyShark, in the 7 Point Highlander Discord about combo. Max, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no worries. Super excited to be here. Really cool.
Before we start off, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself as a Magic player, how long you've been playing, why 7 Point's the best format?
Yeah, for sure. So I started off with original Innistrad a long time ago. I remember getting a red-blue flashback deck that was killing people with a Burning Vengeance. That was really sweet. And then picked up some Casual Commander, played the Aloro light game deck for a really long time, playing Sanguine Bond Exquisite Blood and just ruining lots of casual games.
So
and then sometime around...
You were born as a combo player.
I guess so. In hindsight, I have been playing a lot more combo than I realized. I like to think that I only picked up the unfair cards recently, but maybe that's actually just not true.
Yeah. Now, Max, testing my memory here of that Innistrad format. Very important question. What was your preferred draw engine? Was it Think Twice or Frantic? Was it called Frantic Search or something? Or the one where you had to draw two, discard one random?
Oh, Desperate Ravings. Yeah. I think the deck was really bad back then. I think it was self-milling with Curse of the Bloody Tome and this Dream Twist, I think was a flashback spell that milled you. It was not good, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, so tell us, what other formats do you play and why is 7 Point the best of them?
No, I was just Casual Commander, and then sometime around late 2018, maybe around Dominaria, something around then, I started playing 7 Point and never looked back. The format is incredible. I've always played blue decks in whatever description. I started off with kind of more Controlling Miracles lists and then stopped wanting to go to time so much and started adding some little combos and then realized that the combos were the fun part of the decks and just went all in on those.
Hell yeah. Do you have a message? Obviously, 7 Point, we're always trying to recruit. And I feel like Commander is a pretty fertile ground. Do you have a message for the other, let's just say lost souls in the Commander world who are yet to make the jump? What would you say to them?
Yeah, totally. Well, I think even outside of Commander, I think Singleton is obviously a huge pull to the format. Just the concept of if you come from other constructed worlds, this Singleton deck building gives you a lot more kind of variety of cards that you pull from, because obviously, you're playing 60 unique cards as opposed to maybe 15 unique cards in other constructed decks.
Mm-hmm.
And as well, the bad matchups in Singleton are really interesting because it's never crushing, right? Your opponent can just draw the wrong half of their deck and just not have... And suddenly, the worst matchup is only 60-40 as opposed to an 80-20 that other formats where you have four ofs can really crush you. And then in terms of Highlander as a competitive format, I like the 1v1 nature of it. I found the politicking in Commander can be quite difficult to kind of work with and work around, whereas in this zero-sum game where it's 1v1, it's there's no bad feelings, both of you are trying your best to win, it's a lot more kind of direct. And of course the concept of sideboarding is I think it's a really important thing for a constructed format to have better deck diversity. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly in Commander, they kind of are in a bit of a world where basically every deck is a combo deck, right? Because no one has a sideboard, so the hate pieces, it's hard to main all of them. I'm not a huge Commander head, but am I kind of on the mark there?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends what style of Commander you're playing. Obviously, in a more casual environment, it's more battle cruisery type stuff. But as you start really trying to play to win, it's really hard to attack four people at once. So a combo that kills the entire table is kind of the go-to. And so, I mean, a lot of very powerful Commander decks migrate pretty well across to 7 Point because they're also Singleton combo decks that do similar types of things. So I think it is kind of a natural jumping off point for sure.
Cool. All right, Liam, what do we got next, mate?
Right, well, today we're speaking with Maxi about combo. And so we've got a little graphic to show about where different whereas different deck archetypes are placed within the meta. But before we get into that, Max, do you just want to tell us what does combo mean to you in one sentence or less?
Yeah, for sure. So I describe combo as combining an extremely synergistic set of cards together to win the game in an unusual or non-traditional way. So that sentence kind of pulls together two things. You have the synergistic set of cards and the way that you actually win. You kind of need both for it to be a combo deck in my eyes.
Yeah, and by unusual, you basically mean just like not combat damage, right? Like,
Well, it can be combat damage, but the way that you set up that combat damage win is always through some kind of non-traditional way where you're not just playing like one drop creature, two drop creature, three drop creature. You're like, you've dragon stormed to create a lethal combat attack, or you've reanimated some giant creatures, which is like they've appeared on the board much faster than a traditional mid-range deck. So you can win through combat, but the way that you get that combat win is kind of more unusual. Yeah.
yeah, that makes sense. Like these cards, they're coming out way ahead of traditional schedule. Things aren't being played on curve per se. There's like yeah, makes sense, makes sense. I do like as well that Lime asked you to do it in one sentence or less. I was wondering if you'd embrace the challenge of trying to do it in different sentences.
The best combos are A plus Bs. I was expecting something like that.
Well, we've got synergy and the way to win the game. That's A plus B.
A plus
There you
B,
go.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
that's true. All
Let's
right,
have a
well,
look at this graphic. I'll let Mouse go through this.
yeah, so look, this is my kind of take on like archetypes as a grid, and one of the things I wanted to ask you, Max, is if you think I'm on the money with the combo thing here, because in my mind, and this is kind of like what you said, the pure combo decks are proactive synergy decks. They're not waiting for anything to happen. They want the game to end very quickly, without really caring for what their opponent's doing, and the way they win is basically by the cards synergizing together. Like these cards would be terrible by themselves; they only work because they're put together. Whereas like there's this very large bubble of hybrid combo where they're still kind of on the synergy end, but they tend to creep a little bit more towards individually powerful cards, and that you could have like a control hybrid combo, a tempo hybrid combo, a mid-range hybrid combo. Like tempo might be like Grixis Tempo Thoracle, mid-range might be Omnath Walks, combos like might be like Sneak and Show, might be like a combo control deck. Is this how you see the kind of archetype fitting as well, or like what would you change if you had to change anything?
Yeah, 100%. I think the key thing is that left side of the grid is really where combo sits. And it can kind of take on a spectrum between proactive and reactive. But you'll find that the combo parts of the reactive deck are quite proactive in themselves, if that makes sense. So definitely this synergy half.
Well, what do you mean by that? That the proactive parts of the combo are reactive?
So you'll find that like combo control as an archetype is playing like a bunch of control cards, and then its combo is just like a couple of cards that single-handedly win the game. That they're not reactive cards in themselves. Like I guess an example would be like if you play an Oracle control list where you're just playing some like blue-black control shell that has a couple of Oracle cards to win the game. The Oracle cards are not reactive. Like they're just kind of how you close the game out after you've stabilized, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. As opposed to, for example, like I like playing cards like Pyroglyph in my control decks because they are both a removal spell and a threat, which ends the game. Like the combo control cards, like those cards are dedicated game enders. They are not trying to interact with your opponent per se.
Yeah, 100%. I also commonly see these types of graphics, I guess, with a fair, unfair axis on it. It's a little bit kind of harder to visualize or explain, but you always put combo on this unfair side as opposed to decks like control or aggro on the fair side. And that's kind of that unusual way of winning I was describing earlier, is this fair, unfair axis. Is another way of looking at it.
And one thing I wanted to ask you, if you reckon, well, you know what you think of this. I feel like in 7 Point, there is a lot more hybrid combo. Like, I feel like when I think about, like, Legacy and stuff like that, like, the Sneak and Show decks, they're, like, 4 Ancient Tomb, they're Lotus Petals. But, like, in 7 Point, the combo decks don't feel that all in. They tend to feel like, I guess a little bit more like, again, the best Legacy example of this would kind of be like the Frog Reanimator decks, where they kill you Psychic Frog or Reanimator. But that kind of dual purpose deck feels more common in Highlander. Do you think that's true? And if so, why?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's a couple of factors pushing towards that. The first is the singleton nature. Like, you can't run 4 LED for Echo of Aeons in this format, so it's much harder to build a coherent game plan. There
Mhm.
definitely are a few all-in combo decks that like are exclusively combo that exist. A couple of examples would be Storm, Tolarian Wheels. Reanimator is often just all in with no backup game plan, and High Tide.
Yeah.
But I think there's a huge amount of space in these like hybrid combos. A couple of examples would be Goblins, which is a kind of combo aggro deck, which is a really unique space.
Yeah.
I would describe Breach as a combo tempo deck, but it could also be described as combo mid-range or combo control, depending on a couple of card choices.
Mhm.
You've got Oracle and Flash, which both play out often like combo control. And then I would actually describe lands as a combo prison deck, depending, of course, on the way you build it. If you build the kind of creature-light versions, it plays out a lot more like a combo deck than the more creature-focused mid-range strategies. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely feel like another for me lands, and I guess another example of the type of deck I'm thinking of, like the welder, like Bomberman decks, kind of occupy this space in my mind that they're like these kind of like combo synergy decks where there aren't like two combo pieces. They're really kind of like five combo pieces, but you don't really need all of them. You just need some number of permutations between two or three, and depending on which permutation you get, you're either, you know what I mean? Like you're either doing something a little bit unfair or something very unfair. That they like really strike me as these super synergy decks, which feels very different to like Thoracle, where you know it's an all or nothing. Like it's either doing everything with the pact or it's doing nothing. Do you have any thoughts like that?
Yeah, 100%. I think this like singleton nature is comes back into this as well, because if you have two cards that just like win the game whenever you draw them, they're going to be like so much better in a 4-0 format where you have 4 copies of A and 4 copies of B. Whereas in Highlander, it's often more like, okay, these cards approximately win the game when I assemble them, or it's like I have a bunch of like half of A's and a bunch of half of B's, and some of them happen to accidentally synergize super well together, and you kind of oops your way into a win a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think that, like, because, obviously with what you're saying, that the singleton nature kind of makes these strategies more necessary, do you think that ultimately one ends up being better than the other? Like, should most combo decks be hybrid combo? Or, do you think it's like, look, it's just like a metagame call? Like, what do you, or is it just depending on what type of combo you run? Like, like for example, Channel Mirror probably can't really run a backup mid-range plan. Yeah, what do you think? Is one kind of like archetype or macro type, where people should be in Highlander?
So I think a lot of it actually stems around this artifact type discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Artifacts are really interesting in 7 Point because there is a lot of extremely powerful artifact hate. I'm not sure if this is true in other formats. I don't have enough experience in Modern and Legacy, but it feels like there are haymakers like Null Rod, Energy Flux, Brotherhood's End, Stony Silence that kind of completely demolish artifact decks. And
Yep.
lots of people in this format have well prepared sideboards where you often see 2 or 3 of those specific cards ready to beat artifacts. And this kind of means that if you're an artifacts deck, you need to be prepared for that hate. But also, if you're playing just a couple of artifacts that are necessary for your combo to win, you might as well go kind of all in on those artifacts.
Right.
And
Okay.
this kind of means that a lot of these all-in combo decks tend to be really artifacts focused. I describe that to be true of like Storm, Wheels, and these Welder decks, where because you're already opening yourself up to Nullrod, you might as well just make the deck lose to Nullrod at that point and find different ways of beating it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I suppose like do you think of the same thing of the graveyard, right? Because like on the other hand, things like Breach, Reanimator like feel very all in on like the graveyard as opposed to or even honestly before Nadu, some variations of Flash were pretty much like on a graveyard loop. Is that kind of the same thing where you might as well be all in on it if you're going to be using the graveyard?
Yeah, that's actually really true. I hadn't thought of that. 100%, and that's why Reanimator kind of fits into that as well as more of an all-in deck, because it's like, oh, I'm already weak to Leyline of the Void or Tormod's Crypt. I might as well just hard commit to it and then make my sideboard full of ways of answering those instead. So yeah, 100% agree with that.
And so then what do you think about the decks like Omnath Walks, which really do try to or like the Tempo Thoracle decks, which try to kind of straddle more of the middle ground? Like, what's the like if you have to give your best like why these decks are competitive edge or what metagame do these decks play into? What would you say there?
So I think they're a lot better when people are prepared with the correct amount of hate. Like when people start preparing all of these Brotherhood's Ends and things, and like main deck Dalpi Voidwalkers, it does make life much harder for these all-in combo decks, and that's when
Right.
pivoting to a more hybrid strategy can be useful. I think as
Okay.
well, kind of these decks evolved not necessarily from people taking an all-in combo deck and going, let's cut some of the combo cards and make it hybrid. It feels more like these decks have evolved from taking a mid-range or aggro or control deck and going, let me see if I can add this combo finisher to make life really hard for my opponent. And it
Mm.
feels kind of like a divergent evolution where we've just had these all-in combo decks that lots of pilots are brewing and making, and then separately people have kind of come up with this hybrid combo plan kind of in a separate way. So they do feel like very different strategies to me.
Yeah, I kind of get what you're saying. Hey, like a lot of the time when I make my like kind of green mid-range decks, like if I'm playing four dorks, I'm kind of like, I might as well just put in natural order and attract. So like it's 1 point, the impact is so high, like it's, and I feel like as well when I've been playing with friends, it's a common thing. And I suppose like before Nadu went to two, we certainly saw a lot of that. It's like, well, if you're in blue green and you're playing creatures, like why not just play Nadu and some enabler? Like it seems very free, but gives like a totally out of the blue angle.
Yeah, totally. It's also a good way of spending extra points. Like a lot of these combo cards are quite fairly pointed very highly because it does feel like insane when your opponent suddenly out of nowhere just drops two cards and the game ends.
Yeah.
And so decks that like have spare points can be like, oh, I'll just, pay 5 points for a time walk, given that my mid range plan doesn't have many points in it at the moment, or, I'm a control deck that's just leveraging lots of cards that aren't pointed, like Counterspell and Brainstorm and things. These aren't pointed. So I
Yeah.
might as well just throw in like a Breach or Oracle combo to end the game, and use my points that way.
If I can quickly harken back to an earlier observation you made about how prepared the meta is, like it sounds to me like what you're saying is, look, if you're rocking up to your like local meta, and you know that everyone knows what you're on, like kind of in Wollongong, whenever Colin shows up, like everyone always puts in 2 to 3 pieces of artifact hate, just because like we want to win, but also it's particularly fun to witness Colin having a bit of a tanty after like getting Brotherhood's ended.
Totally,
If you're in
totally.
if you're saying if you're in that situation, then you maybe would consider the more mid range or the more hybrid plan. But maybe if you're in a situation where you think you're going to take the meta by surprise, the more all in combo is the way to go.
Yeah, look, that's part of it. There's also some interesting things in that all-in combo tends to be substantially faster than a hybrid combo, just because your turn to kill is a lot more. Uh, it's faster when all your cards are angled towards the same game plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay.
Uh, and
And is
so
that just like a personal
some
preference thing, or is that just like a competitive edge thing?
well, some metagames want you to speed up a lot. I remember a CanCon a couple of years ago where initiative was quite rampant, and hybrid combo was actually quite weak in that format just because it was too slow to kill. When your opponent's
Okay.
dropping like a turn 3 or turn 4 initiative card, you can't spend the next couple of turns slowly setting up your combo. So all in combo was a lot more effective in that particular metagame because it forced you to really race.
Okay, so your like so another consideration might be if the metagame is demanding speed, then you can provide speed with an all-in combo. But if people are more willing to do the grind, well then that's when the mid-range or the hybrid pile might be more optimal.
Yeah, 100%. I've always felt really favored in fast combo versus aggro matchup
Yeah,
because you just don't care about all their creatures. Like, they don't do anything. A
yeah,
lot of aggro decks play a lot of grindy cards to try and make sure they can beat control. And, I just laugh whenever I see Sulfuric Vortex. Like, this card is useless against me.
yeah.
Um,
Like yeah, they
whereas
will be dead by the time this thing burns me out. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Whereas against control, like, that's where the hybrid combat strategies become a lot more effective because suddenly they have to go, oh, I need an answer to, like, Dragon's Rage Channeler and Dalthy and Tamio against Breach, as well as their Breach combo. And it's like, what if I just draw all the creature removal and they draw their tutors? What if I draw all of my, like, hand attack and they just draw 3 replaceable threats? Like, it's super awkward as a control deck to fight hybrid combo, I feel.
Okay, okay. Help me understand this because I'm actually as a control player, right? I'm kind of in two minds about this. On
Mm.
one hand, I have had it described to me by like other combo players as like who play pure combo. They're like, look, you don't understand. When I'm against control, basically every counterspell reads blue blue win the game, um, and that's why control is like a very difficult matchup. Whereas like they'll say kind of echo what you're saying. The hybrid plan means you have to respond to multiple axes. But sometimes I feel, and maybe it doesn't, maybe it depends on what combo deck I'm playing. That sometimes I almost prefer the hybrid plans because it means that all of the tools in my deck have something to target. Like against pure combo, the removal doesn't really do anything, even if the counter spells are excellent. Against the mid-range plans or the hybrid plans, I'm like, great, my removal can target their creatures, my counter spells can target their combo pieces. Like there are no dead cards. I don't know if you've ever played any control decks, but does any of that like ring true, or do you think it's like, nah, at the end of the day, you know, the blue win the game is just where it's at?
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I found like one of the reasons that I really do like the all-in combo decks is there's something super satisfying about your opponent just staring at the hand of lightning bolts and fatal pushes and being like, what am I doing here? And against some control builds that have like really respected the aggro metagame, I guess, where they're playing a lot of removal, you can get a huge edge by playing all-in combo as opposed to hybrid combo because you don't have any lightning rods in your deck. Like your whole deck just blanks all of their removal.
Yeah.
And it's also this speed thing, right? If you're winning before the control deck can hold up 2 islands, Counterspell's not a very good card anymore. So there are definitely ways of playing all-in combo that are good against control. And I don't think that it's like an unlosable matchup for combo. But you have to think about the matchup and think about, when I'm playing an artifact deck, I'm holding a lot of my artifacts so that Brotherhood's End doesn't beat me in game 2 and 3. Like, I play out the game very differently against control on those post-sideboard games and the pre-sideboard ones.
Yeah, okay. Can I just ask one last question on this? What, with the current meta, where do you think people should be right now?
Yeah, so I think the current meta is really interesting. I was actually super impressed by the recent event in Sydney just the other day that I played, because there was actually an enormous amount of control in that event. Like, everywhere I was seeing Lutries and 3-4Es, and like, it was bizarre. I hadn't seen so much control before after so many cries from the Discord saying this archetype is completely dead. It did not feel that way. So I think these hybrid strategies are a little bit better at the moment than the all-in, just because of the way people are building these control decks. So I'd probably lean towards like a Breach or an Grixis Oracle list as probably the strongest type of deck if I had to like play something just to win. But that being said, there are definitely ways of building all-in combo that are very strong against control. And I think we saw a recent resurge in Reanimator that proved that point.
And is that just like the proactive hand attack, or is there like what particular ways are you thinking?
Yeah, it's part of it. You can also play like Haymakers, like 3-3 defense grid. What's the City of Solitude? I think are all sideboard cards that I don't see as much of as perhaps people could be running. These cards make it so tough for blue-based control to really do anything against you.
Yeah,
so there are ways of building your sideboard.
It's the Enchanted Swarms, it's the Teferis, it's the City of Solitude, like all of that kind of stuff is really like it just makes it impossible for the control plan to work properly.
Yeah, 100%. I also think that there are cool sideboard dukes that were a bit unexplored. I remember a long time ago, a really cool innovation by, I think it was JP or Richard Owens, when they were playing an all-in Storm deck, was to play cards like Hooting Mandrills and Tarmogoyf in the sideboard, because it was well known that these Storm decks don't play a single creature, and so the control deck decides that alt removal, and then you really blow them out of the water. And the threats have improved substantially, so that game plan is quite effective. Like, you'll end a Sheldred against a combo decks that's taken out, against a control decks that have removed their Swords to Plowshares and Path to Exiles, and suddenly, like, they can't beat the card anymore.
Yeah, actually, that does. So I've got a friend who plays like a Tinker Storm deck, and he's like one of his potential sideboards. He's kind of just like 15 black mid-range / initiative cards, like down to the Aracocracy, is the book, but like it's just the Nethergoyf, Emperor of Bones, Douthy, Baragoyf, Sheldred, like even into the Catacombs, and it is a very like effective like, oh man, if I don't have removal, this completely hoses. But overall, do you rate these kind of like all-in Duke plans on the sideboard, or do you think it's like, look, it's like a one-trick pony, and once people know you're on it? Like, what do you think?
No, I think they're super reasonable. Part of the magic of combo is that across the board you have an extremely high game 1 win percentage. Like, this is a game where your opponent is not prepared, they don't have their sideboard pieces, which are silver bullets, and perhaps if they don't know you as a player, they might not mulligan correctly. Like, I've seen people that haven't played against combo players that frequently just keep a hand of regular lands and spells, like a couple of cantrips and removal and a threat, and that hand just does not do anything against combo. Like, you need to find interaction and answers.
Yeah.
And so, given that you have such a good game 1, I think a sideboard Duke is actually quite effective, because you're not going to have as high win percentage in games 2 and 3. So having something dramatic that you can do to try to flip the tables in those difficult situations can be quite good. Yeah.
If you are doing the sideboard duke, so let's just say like it's like the one I described. You're like an all-in like fast mana combo deck or whatever. But on the side, or maybe your artifacts, but on the sideboard you've got like this total mid-range swap. Do you think if you win game one, you should still run it back in game two just to see if their sideboard's prepared, but then duke in game three? Or do you duke in game two and then do the fancy trick where you like shuffle your entire sideboard into your library and then like remove 15 cards to keep them guessing? Like, do you think there's a correct mind game to go?
Definitely Duke in game two. Like, don't wait because it's too late by the time you get to game three. So yeah, if you are playing an unusual sideboard plan, game two is where you start, and then game three is like, yeah, I guess you flip a coin and decide. It might be like you might be able to get a sense of your opponent's main deck and sideboard configuration from those first two games and be able to see, maybe their sideboard pieces aren't actually that good in game two. Maybe I can just try the all-in for game three again, or you can see. There's also like if you win game one and then the sideboard duke works in game two, there isn't a game three. So you can try that too.
One argument I have made in the past, and I'll see what you make of it, is that if you've got most of these sideboard dukes, right, are board centric because like the combo tends to be like a flurry of spells you win in an unusual fashion, but the sideboard duke is nearly always like play creatures attack. And so my argument was that the sideboard duke you should nearly always do in game three, because if you've won game one, which you often do, that means that you're on the draw game two, and these like kind of like board centric creature plans do actually get a lot of equity by just being on the board a turn earlier. So why reveal it to your opponent until you're actually in a position where it's got the most chance to work? Like your opponent is the most convinced that you're in an all-in combo deck, and also you're on the play, which kind of lends to the plan. Do you think there's any water to that argument?
Yeah, some amount. I do think the play draw delta is maybe not as extreme in Highlander as other constructed formats. I don't have any data or any evidence to back that opinion up at all, but it does feel. Sorry.
I'll say we're all vibes based here.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But it does feel like I wouldn't dramatically alter my deck composition based on play or draw outside of a couple of things like Veil of Summer against hand attack, or there's a couple of caveats to that, like days. Right. But I think that this thing of like bringing in a board-centric game plan game two is great because game three, it puts the onus on them to guess. Like if you wait until game three to do it, you don't get to play this mind game. Maybe that's also just because I enjoy playing the mind game, but
the mind game three is very pleasurable. Like, do you do the thing where you shuffle the whole sideboard in and take 15 cards out?
Yeah, or make some offhand comment like, well, I guess those creatures weren't very good or something, and then keep them in. You just do all of the nonsense that your opponent should probably ignore. But yeah.
I want to remark about the Days and Veil of Summer. Are these cards you would really take out if you were on the draw? Like, I understand Days being behind a land when you're already on the draw is pretty bad, but Veil of Summer I would have thought is like nearly always a mainstay, right?
It really depends. I have actually found recently that a lot of black-based hand attack decks are playing tap lands on turn one, be that Surveil lands or, just playing a cantrip. That might just be recency bias, but I have felt that you are actually often alright to keep Veil of Summer on the draw. But there was a period of time not too recently where I was like, no, you can't keep Veil of Summer or Surge of Salvation or any other kind of like, cards like Miscast and these like one drops that answer instants or sorceries are a lot worse on the draw than on the play, because you don't get to cast them to a turn one hand attack piece, which is really what they are there for.
And is that would you say to the black hand attackers, like you should be cast even if the Surveil land is tempting, you should cast it on turn one if you're on the play for that reason? Like why risk getting that?
Yeah, it does depend on the nature of the combo deck. Like some combo decks don't cast their combo on turn one, but against any artifact or storm-based strategy, you 100% need to fire off the hand attack immediately before you surveil or play a cantrip.
Yeah.
Against something like Reanimator, you might be able to wait, depending on how much fast mana you've seen, but most of the time, just get the hand attack out straight away, because you need the information and need to know what the style of the game is going to look like.
Yeah, as opposed to how hard you go to the board, stuff like that. Cool. All right. Well,
Yeah, totally.
do you have anything else on this topic, mate, or should we go to the next slide?
Yeah, look, we'll go to the next slide, but I've got a question to start it off. So we have a whole bunch of different combos on the screen here, but I'd like to hear about how do you go in a combo versus combo matchup? We've spoken a lot about going against control and aggro, but what about in the mirror?
Yeah, to be honest, the worst part of playing combo, in my opinion, is the mirror, because it does feel like two ships in the night where nothing either player does really affects the other too much. It just kind of feels like a race at that point. Um, Hybrid combo, I will say, is way better in the mirror than all-in combo, just because you have meaningful interaction and ways of slowing your opponent down that all-in combo often doesn't.
Does that mean that in the combo mirror, is it like super aggressive with the mulligans? Like you're literally just trying to find stuff which works, or?
Yeah, 100%. So I'd say in an all-in combo deck versus an all-in combo deck, I'm mulliganing a lot harder than I would against any other deck because, like, you can almost imagine your full combo opponent as an even faster aggro deck, like the fastest possible aggro deck you'll ever face. You need to have a hand that's capable of winning very, very early in the game, depending on the type of combo they're playing, of course.
And you think like the black-based ones, which obviously have access themselves to stuff like Thoughtseize, like do they gain a significant edge, or in the grand scheme of things, is it just like a race no matter what?
So I think it really does depend on the style of combo deck, because even the black all-in combo decks very rarely play Thoughtseize, or if they do, it's often just a one of these like Storm or Black Wheels lists. Whereas these hybrid combo decks, like you're just so favored in the hybrid combo versus full combo mirror. I would give a massive edge to the hybrid combo deck. It does actually feel like one of those crushing matchups. It's extremely difficult for the full combo deck to win, barring an absurd draw, of course.
Now, Max, it's time to really get some rage happening in the comments. You see a lot of combo decks here. Rank them for me. What do you think? Obviously metagame or whatever, but at the moment, what do you think are the best to worst combo decks?
Yeah, sure. So I've expressed some quite spicy takes on the Discord already regarding particularly Time Vault and Oracle. So I'll start off by saying that I think Breach is the strongest hybrid combo deck in the game. I think Underworld Breach being only 3 points, Intuition being a fourth, as a one-card kill, is extremely effective. And this kind of Lurus hybrid plan means that you grind out control decks very effectively, while having such a fast combo to beat aggro decks. So I think Breach is for sure one of the better hybrid combo plans at the moment. I also feel it.
Are we looking at the same screen with the 8 or so different combos?
Yeah. So on the top left looks like an Underworld Breach type strategy.
Yep.
I'd also pay a lot of respect to bottom right in Goblins. I think the aggro combo is a really interesting place to land. Because control really struggles to deal with, am I bringing in a lot of removal, or how am I answering these goblins, basically? And I think goblins is actually like quite disrespected in this format. I think even with the goblin recruiter pointing and stuff, I think it's quite a good place to be, just because it's such an unusual game plan.
Yeah, I think Mark's recently top 8 with it. Did he not?
Yeah, definitely. The Sydney event quite recently. I think it's a really, really good strategy, and there's a lot of very dedicated pilots that have tuned the list quite effectively, which also matters a lot for these combo decks, is how many people are working on them at one time.
Yep. All right, so are you saying that these are the number 1 and 2, or?
Yeah, I'd probably put them as 1 and 2, particularly with the amount of control I've seen recently. I think that, once again, hybrid combo is where you want to be at the moment over all-in combo, if I was to play the strongest possible strategy.
All right, quick fire the other ones for us. What do we think ranks 3 through 8?
So I think Lands is in a pretty good spot. Depointing to Strip Mine, Fast Bond, DT recently has put it in a good place. I think if you build Lands as a combo deck, it's quite effective. So I put that in 3. Reanimator probably in position 4. It depends how much graveyard hate is being bandied around, particularly main deck. If you see a lot of Emperor of Bones and Delphi Voidwalkers, I would pull back on the Reanimator, but I think it's a solid strategy. I'd probably go to some sort of Tinker-based list next, be that Tinker Wheels or Tinker Storm, and then kind of we get to decks that I think are substantially less. This is all just purely my opinion, of course, and I think you can have incredible success in this format with any deck if you've tuned enough and practiced enough. But I do think that it is harder to win with Oracle, Time Vault, and Tolarian Wheel style strategies at the moment than the other things that I've listed, just because of the various point points of other cards relative to each other and currently the metagame environment we're looking at.
Well, look, I mean, I think we've successfully done the Rage Bait ranking alongside giving Lands and Goblins the most respect which they've received in years, certainly in the It's good. So, hell yes, if Lands and Goblin players, you've got fans. All right, let's kick it over to the next slide. So this is, honestly, Max, this is, aside from Thoracle, this is the deck which I most associate you with because, particularly it's like the name, it has a real kind of like vibe to it. And this is the Key Wheel deck. Now, this deck is not one which you just recommend. You would not hand this to somebody on Friday and be like, oh, do this, it'll be fun. Like, you kind of really need to know what's going on. Can you maybe start with just giving us a bit of a history of where this deck kind of comes from?
Yeah, sure. So I have to give a huge amount of credit to Isaac Egan. I believe he was the first person, and apologies if there were others before him, but he's the first person I'm aware of that kind of built this Tolarian Wheels list. I want to say, I think Lachlan Ward Smith as well. I'm not super familiar with them as a player, but I believe they also played a lot with these Tolarian Wheels and Time Twister style decks. So traditionally, this has been more of a Grixis coloured deck, I want to say, where you're leveraging cards like Wheel of Fortune, Time Twister, Echo Vaon's Memory Jar to draw a bunch of fast artifact mana, dump it all on the table, make your Tolarian Academy tap for a billion mana and just cast more wheels until you can kill your opponent with a ham sandwich. So this is definitely an all-in combo deck for sure. There is no backup plan here. We're casting wheels and fast artifact mana, and we're going to lose to Nullrod and Brotherhood's End, but we're going to fight through those and try and be faster than the hate pieces.
You said kill them with a hand sandwich. That is the first thing which I think is confusing about these decks. Like, how do they actually win?
So I do want to say that Isaac Egan's more recent lists that add black are a lot easier to kill your opponent with because they play cards like Orcish Bowmaster, which is a legitimately fast kill.
Yep.
I took Isaac Egan's deck and decided to cut Bowmaster because I didn't love it as a point. It actually takes 3 wheels to kill your opponent because you are never pressuring your life total in another way. And I believe that you should be able to kill your opponent in another way if you have cast 3 wheels to win.
Yeah, okay.
So I took the depointing of Fast Bond and tried to build an alternative way of winning the game because Fast Bond is also extremely good with these draw 7 cards. You draw 7 lands, you dump 7 lands on the table, gives you enough mana to cast the next wheel and keep going.
Yeah, I remember I was building like a kind of like a mono red storm list, and it occurred to me as I was building, I'm like, oh, I really should actually make this red green because when you impulse and like a third of the cards are lands, it means Fast Bond is basically like another ritual. Like even Summer Bloom kind of feels like a ritual if you're seeing enough cards.
Yeah, Fast Bond is a truly unreal Magic card, and I think if Mental Misstep wasn't as prevalent as it was, people would be it's really messed up the things you can do with a Fast Bond at an average hand. It just turns everything extremely volatile and explosive.
Right, this is another excellent opportunity for Rage Bait, which just can't be resisted. So is in your mind the argument that Mental Misstep is like a healthy safety valve for the format? Is that where it's at?
No, I think Mental Misstep is far too strong. It's just beyond the pale in terms of power level. The win rate when drawn on this card must be unbelievable. I want to start tracking the stats someday. Yeah. And I think that decks like this, like Key Wheel, I play Mental Misstep. I think that that's a sign that the card is ubiquitous to the point of being unhealthy, because Mental Misstep is completely contrary to the strategy of this deck. But I'm forced to run it because the best Mental Misstep target for this deck is the opponent's Mental Misstep, and I need it for mostly that reason.
And you would probably then say, look, if Mental Misstep goes to 1, then the kind of card, like really broken 1-drops like Fast Bond probably need to be bumped back up as well.
Yeah, I'd say Fast Bond would need to probably go up. I wouldn't be upset if Mana Vault went up and Crop Rotation stayed at 1 point if you pointed Mental Misstep. I think that those are all reasonable takes.
So then once like you're drawing all your 7, so like Isaac's deck, obviously like it's killing them with something like Bowmasters, or I can imagine a version similarly running something like Shieldred or whatever, like just a punish you when you draw type spell. But how is your deck winning?
Yeah, so it is complicated. I want to say that if you are just kind of using this deck for the first time or you want to try it in the tournament, you should probably add a Walking Ballista to your side or main board, because that's a really good mana outlet that'll just kill your opponent.
Right.
So the primary win condition is Karn plus Mycosynth Lattice. When your opponent's board is clear, Mycosynth Lattice plus Karn means your opponent can no longer tap their lands for mana. It also crucially means cards like Force of Vigor, Force of Negation, Force of Will are colorless in addition to all the other cards in their hand, so you cannot cast them for their alternate casting costs, which is something that people forget.
Liam had his Mycosynth Lattice Force of Vigor at CanCon. What were we talking about?
Oh no. Oh,
Don't do this to me, Mouse. Don't do this to me.
I'm sorry. Good resist.
Yeah, so
it is a relevant thing to bring up though, hey, because like often these like pitch elementals and stuff like endurance kind of are how decks interact freely on the stack, and it's important to know that they're colorless when in their hand.
yeah, I genuinely played this deck for a year and didn't realize this, and I was doing stuff like, bouncing my own card to fetch Defense Grid to play around Endurance, and then a judge told me, no, they can't cast Endurance into this. I was like, oh, that makes my life so much easier. That's
yeah. So, and are you just like, is the opponent dying of being demoralized or something once they're under the lattice? Because like that doesn't actually kill them. Or I suppose Khan can tick up and make the lattice a 6/6, eh?
Yeah, demoralization is a pretty legitimate kill condition, I'm sure you as a control connoisseur would be aware of.
Excuse me.
But you can actually kill them on the spot, which is important when you're playing against other combo decks that have, proper win conditions, perhaps if you haven't managed to find card lattice. The kill involves getting Fast Spawned, Zero Orb, and Crucible of Worlds out.
Yep.
This allows you to sacrifice lands, replay them from the graveyard. Fast Spawned will make you lose a life, but Crucible will gain you 2 life every time you do this. So you're gaining as much life as you would like, and your lands are kind of untapping in this process, so it's also giving you infinite mana. Once you've got infinite mana and life, you can use the one of Surveil land, Meticulous Archive, to surveil your library into your graveyard.
Yep.
If your Echo Vaons are still in your library at this point, you can flash it back to redraw your deck. Before you flash it back, I'd recommend playing the Waterlogged Grove from your graveyard, which lets you now draw as many cards as you want. So we've got infinite life, infinite mana, infinite cards at this point, and the kill that I've been mainly using involves Memory Jar. So if you play out Memory Jar and you have a Academy Ruins in play, you can basically put 6 artifacts from your graveyard on top of your library, make sure Academy Ruins is untapped, sacrifice Memory Jar, and with its trigger on the stack, use Academy Ruins to put it back on top. Right. Then you let your Memory Jar trigger resolve. You'll draw 7 cards, including Memory Jar itself. Your opponent will also draw 7. Then you can get 6 of those artifacts into the graveyard somehow, replay the Memory Jar, and repeat the process. Your opponent's going to draw 7 cards, you'll draw 0, and that should be enough to kill them at that point.
And the reason you can do this, of course, is that you're sacrificing Academy Ruins, replaying it, and you're using its ability after each sacrifice.
Yeah, correct. You need to assemble the Fast One Zero Orb Crucible of Worlds combo before you do this to get enough mana and also to be able to repeatedly untap your Academy Ruins.
When you say you have to get the artifacts in the graveyard somehow, like you don't have like a Clan Ironworks or something, like actually how are they getting there?
Lion's Eye Diamond is the easiest way. So you play the Memory Jar and then you play the Lion's Eye Diamond and activate it, so you discard 5 artifacts plus LED. That tends to work pretty well.
And like if, for example, so imagine that your opponent is like turn 1 extract, right? Or they have some or they have like a Scrabbling Pause and they've got an opportunity to exile something. What should they be getting?
So Khan is the first piece 100% of the time, because if you take any other artifact, Khan can actually get that from exile. So it's really important that you take the Khan immediately. From there, you also need to stop some part of the Fast Bond Crucible Zero Orb loop. I would probably recommend taking Fast Bond out of that, because it's the strongest card independently.
Yep.
Additionally, you can also make an absurd amount of mana and draw cards using the One Ring, Paradox Engine, and Candelabra of Tornos in concert with Tolarian Academy. So I'd probably recommend taking Paradox Engine out of that to stop that loop from working.
Right. But in theory, like this is not like a quote unquote like extractable deck. Like I often feel like when I like turn 1 extract a Thoracle or a Breach, it's nearly GG there and then. Like obviously there is some game to play. But the fact that Khan gets a lot of the pieces means that it's far from over if you're playing against this deck.
Yeah, correct. I'm ecstatic if an opponent brings in or casts Extract against me. They're going down a card to give me a minor road bump, but most of the time I'm capable of comboing through it.
Yeah, very cool.
Ashiok is legitimately terrifying against this deck. Stopping the searches is really obnoxious, and if you activate it maybe 3 times, you probably hit enough win conditions that it's very hard for me to kill you.
Yeah, okay. Ashiok does seem to be a super good combo hoser, I've found.
Yeah, 100%. Most of my decks lose to it, so I'd recommend if you are building combo, Make sure you have answers somewhere for Ashiok, be that like Chain of Vapor into the Flood more, or ways of removing this 3-drop permanent is important.
Yeah.
So there,
It's interesting as well because Liam and I have in Lands Brews kind of done that same initial setup of the infinite life, surveil your library, get the waterlog grove, start drawing. The Echo of Eons is something which we haven't done before. I think we usually just put like Mystic Sanctuary and get World Souls Rage on top. But I do like this idea of, oh yeah, why not just like Echo and do it all again? Like it's something we could definitely think about.
Yeah, Echo's a really silly magic card. If you're able to cast it for its front face, the fact that it goes into your graveyard ready to be cast again for flashback is like just truly obnoxious. I've had a lot of games where you just like play Mana Vault and a couple of Mana Rocks and just like play Echo of Aeons as a fair side as a 6-drop, pass a turn, your opponent doesn't kill you with their fresh 7, and then you just flash it back and go again, and the game is very hard to win from there for your opponent.
Lime, have you got any questions about how this deck functions?
yeah, I do. So you've got a lot of very obvious cards that'll hurt you in the sideboard, Nara and Ashiok, like you just mentioned. But what are some cards which are subtly very annoying for you to deal with that you wish people would play less?
So I have found Brotherhood's End is a really tough one for this deck. There's a really rough tension between Tolarian Academy wanting to play out all your artifacts as quickly as possible, and Brotherhood's End just like cleaning them off. I know like CDH players that play these I guess you can't play Paradox Engine in CDH, but these Paradox Engine style decks, often you are sandbagging your artifacts in hand to wait until a combo turn where you drop them all. It's a lot harder to do them in this style of strategy because you need to kind of deploy Voltaic keys and expedition maps ready to go. So I think mass artifact removal is extremely effective. I think Archon of Emeria low-key is a card that also destroys a lot of these combo strategies. Your mana bases contain very few basics, and fetch for a duel with an Archon out is really, really difficult to beat. Yeah, I think Deafening Stance and High Noon have also increased in popularity, and these are cards you also can't beat. So white is actually a color I'm quite afraid of with these lists because they have a lot of those types of cards to beat me.
So going forward with the rule of law effects, is it the rule of law side or is it like the land side? For example, like is 3-drop Thalia or even 2-drop Thalia for that matter, like that kind of mana taxing thing, is that a big deal as well?
That's a speed bump, but the rule of law is like a lock. So Thalia is effective. I would, if you're seeing a lot of combo in your metagame, I would be happy to include it in the deck and never side it out. But I would not consider it an effective hate piece to include in your sideboard, for instance. Yeah, it's more of a card that's going to be good in the matchup, but it's not one that you are like, yeah, I'm playing its combo, finally I get to see my Thalia. It's more of a, this card happens to be quite strong here. Whereas the rule of law effects are like, yeah, I want to side this in, I want to mulligan for it, I want to see it every game, it's going to be super annoying.
So can I ask us a few card choice questions? First, no Brainstorm?
Yeah, I tried it for a really long time. Unfortunately, you don't have a critical mass of fetch lands, and your tutors are relatively expensive. Things like Fabricate and Inventor's Fair are actually a heavy mana investment. So it's quite hard to shuffle your library with Brainstorm. And I was locking myself out of the game a little bit too often for my liking. Obviously, an extremely strong card, but I don't have enough shufflers to take full advantage of it.
Okay. And then Path to Exile Swords and Balance, which is a pointed card. Is this just like a lot of respect for creature decks? Like what's going on there?
Yeah, also Soul Petition too. I'm not skipping on removal here. Part of it is Collector Ooth is a very common card, particularly in Canberra, where a lot of people are green sunning for Collector Ooth and finding it very frequently, so lots of removal is good. I think Balance is kind of a unique card in that it's a lot better than a removal spell in this deck. I find myself playing several artifacts, including stuff like Chrome Mox and Mox Diamond, which are extremely effective with Balance, and then just casting a Balance to 5-for-1 my opponent. There's also some truly disgusting synergy in the form of Zero Orb and Lion's Eye Diamond with Balance, where you can cast Balance and while it's on the stack, activate Zero Orb a bunch, or sacrifice your Lion's Eye Diamond to truly decimate your opponent's board state. And this deck top decks a lot better than other decks due to the amount of wheels it has, where you're only ever one time Twister draw away from being able to win the game on the spot.
Yeah, okay, because that was what I was thinking. I was like, Balance seems weird when it's I would have assumed that just like an aggro or generic mid-range deck would be better off the top because every card doesn't need other cards to go with. And I was also thinking, if you wheel them back to 7, what's the point? But really, what you're saying is that it buys you the turn such that when you wheel to 7, it's over. Like that, they may have 7 in their hand, but they're never really playing them.
Yeah, totally. I mean, LED plus balance is the worst of those combos I mentioned. But like Zerinal plus balance is crazy because you can sacrifice it down until you just have Tolarian Academy, and then your opponent has 1 land, but your land is a Tolarian Academy, so you will win that game.
Yeah.
Balance is honestly the strongest card in this deck, and I would cut like Tolarian Academy and Time Twister. I would even cut Fast Bond in a heartbeat if I had to before I cut Balance.
Yeah.
It's a
Okay.
really, really powerful Magic card. I would recommend people playing combo decks try it out more, because your deck is innately going down a lot in cards in hand and cards that Balance cares about, and it's often not playing many creatures. So I think this card is very underexplored in combo, and I found it to be so much better than it reads or looks.
Okay, I've got 2 more card choice questions for you. One, and this is kind of in general in combo decks. What do you think of cards like Peak? Because people really value Gataxian Probe for the information, and I get that Probe is free. Do you think that there's any case to be made for Peak?
So I do really like the Black Hand Attack spells in combo, and particularly in a hybrid combo. I think that that's really where you want to be. You get a lot of mileage out of not just the information, but also being able to pick the specific cards that actually matter in the matchup. I mentioned before how like a lot of cards, a lot of the strength of combo is kind of nullifying half your opponent's deck, where like, Goblin Rabble Master is not a good card against combo. Flame Slash is not a good card against combo. Like, you just get to blank a bunch of your opponent's cards, and that makes Hand Attack a lot more effective because you can pick out the pieces that actually do something. I'm not a huge fan of cards like Peak that are just there for information, because you kind of have to straddle this line as a combo pilot of just letting them have it. Like, your game plan is not getting stronger if you wait, so often you just have to rip the band-aid off and hope that the probability is on your side.
So you basically
you can just go for it.
You just do it. Like you just go for it. You make them have it, and if they don't, we just hope that you wheel and go again later.
Yeah, 100%. So, like, for instance, I'd rather have something like a Voltaic Key in my hand than a Peak, because even though the Peak is giving me information, on average, the Key is going to make my going off turn faster, and I think that you should focus on the turn that you go off as opposed to the information you're getting from your opponent.
Yeah. Do you think this is true of, like, this deck more than other combo decks? Like, are there combo decks where you should, for lack of a better word, like, set up, or do you know what I mean, like wait for counter spells and hand attack, or do you think that combo decks and Highlander should just kind of go for it more?
I think the hybrid combo patience is quite important.
Mm-hmm.
But I think in the all-in combo, like, a lot of the time you're better off just going. Like, the game state doesn't get better for you the longer you wait. And it's part of this kind of concept that a lot of the hate in Highlander are these really strong silver bullets that just prevent you from being able to win the game. And you're better off trying to win before your opponent draws a silver bullet, because a small amount of kind of extra wiggle room and extra, value you're getting from waiting for more land drops, or the percentage you gain from that side, is vastly kind of beaten by the percentage your opponent gets as soon as they draw their silver bullet. Like, your win percentage drops tremendously when they draw the silver bullet, as opposed to you just gaining a couple of small percentage points when you're going off turn by waiting a few, if that makes sense.
Right, Lion, do you have a question to ask on this one, mate?
Yeah. Look, can you talk to us a little bit about the mindset you take to mulliganing with these decks, both pre and post board, and in certain matchups?
Yeah, totally. I think that one of the biggest advice points I could give to someone interested in playing combo is just mulligan like 50% more hands than you would normally. I had a huge realization when I was playing Doomsday for a while, where like any hand that just has lands and cantrips is a terrible hand on average. And so I just had a couple of weeks where I would just try mulliganing every single hand that couldn't assemble a combo by about turn 4 or 5. And I found that my win percentage just skyrocketed dramatically. So mulligan really aggressively if you're playing a combo deck. Like, going to, say, 4 or 5 cards with 1 or 2 combo pieces is going to be so much better than keeping an average 7. It's kind of unreal. You really do have a couple of cards in your deck that are so substantially stronger than any of the other cards you have that it's worth really trying to find those cards.
And
So that's definitely true of game 1.
That's the all-in combo, right? Not necessarily the mid-range combo.
I think it's also true for a lot of hybrid combo decks. Like, I think so I haven't played as much land strategies as you guys, but I do feel that when I have tested those strategies, you do want to mulligan a lot harder for your fast bond and your Crucible of World type effects. Because the games where you have those play out so much differently to just, a 7 land hand that has a couple of cantrips in it.
Mm.
And where's the inflection point with that? So you draw your first 7, a couple of lands and some cantrips, throw it away, and then you get a similarly textured hand in mulligans 6 and 5. Are you still throwing those away?
Depends on the matchup. If I know I'm playing against an aggro or mid-range player, I'm a lot more cautious with my mulligans, I guess you could say. I'm keeping a lot more average hands. If I'm against another combo opponent or a player that I believe is on control or hand attack, I'm trying to high roll them. So I'm going to mulligan a lot more aggressively. So I think it's really important to consider the type of opponent and also the average hand that your deck produces. I think these hybrid combo decks should be more tentative with their mulliganing than the full combo decks. But for a full combo deck, I'm more than happy to go to, 4 or 3 cards if the hand is not explosive against an opponent I think that I need that type of start against.
Mm. And what are people doing wrong? Like when they're playing against combo, what mistakes do you think people are making?
Keeping an average hand is the big one. Like a hand the traditional aggro deck thinks is good is not good against a combo deck. Like you do not want just lands and spells. You want to mulligan for your interaction, particularly post board. If you know you're against a combo deck and you have silver bullets, you need to do the same thing as the combo deck player is doing, where they're looking to high roll you. You need to high roll them by mulliganing for that silver bullet. I would be happy to go down once again to 5 or 4 cards as a mid-range or control deck to find a silver bullet against a combo player.
Yeah. So you're also kind of saying against this deck, for example, a 3-card hand of land collective is going to be better than most 7s.
100%. Yeah, so much more effective.
Yeah.
You just have to hope that you find a clock or a way to beat their answer to your collective or another hate piece in time. But it's going to be better than the average 7.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other thing that's important to do against combo decks is kind of in a similar way where the combo player has to kind of make the control opponent have it and just go for it sometimes. I think as a control player, waiting and sitting on counter spells is not always correct. I think that you actually need to establish a clock of some sort or try and develop a proactive hate piece before just sitting there waiting with, like, for example, counter spells. I have had control opponents just sit there and wait and obviously hold up counterspell, and then for the rest of the game, I'm never deploying my One Ring, I'm never casting a Paradox Engine, I'm never casting a Time Twister. I'm going to bait out their counterspell with some slightly worse card that also probably should be answered. Or just even happily sit back and make land drops, because I know if the game goes long, eventually they'll have to tap out through a threat, and then there's my window. So I think being too patient is actually quite dangerous as a control deck.
Yeah, I definitely, particularly when I've ever played decks like Grixis, which have like 1 and 2 drop threats, I've always just told people as well, like just tap out on turn 2, get the threat on the board. Like unless you happen to be the absolute high rolling of you're running like Brazen Burrow and you can flash it in or whatever, the probability that they can combo kill you on turn 2 is way less than they can combo kill you turn 3 or 4 or whatever. So you've just got to deploy something and get the clock happening, and then you can wait.
Yeah, agreed. And as a combo player, like when I'm sitting there and my opponent's holding up 2 mana, I'm super relaxed. Like I don't have a care in the world. I'll just have a lot of fun. But if I'm sitting there and my opponent has played like a Dragon's Rage Channeler on turn 1 or turn 2, and it's beating me down every turn, and now they're holding up 2 mana, that's like a nightmare. It's like I don't know what I'm doing at that point. It's really tough. So yeah, deploy the threat early and then sit back, but make sure you have a clock.
Yeah. Lime, do you want to finish off with some quick fire questions?
Yeah, Maxi. So try and answer these without thinking. Just give us your gut check feeling for it. Number 1.
Absolutely.
If you could remove one hate piece, main board or sideboard, from the meta, what would it be?
I think Archon of Emeria is like a really rough main deck piece, so that's my first one. Ashiok is the one I would go to if I thought about it a little more.
Not 3 fairy?
Look, that one is miserable for a different reason. That's really tough with the hybrid control combo, but as pure combo, you don't really care about it that much. But yeah, that's also a really miserable magic card I could definitely talk on for a lot longer.
If you could point one card in the meta, what would it be?
Mental Misstep, far and away. Card is very powerful for 0 points, and it sees a lot of play. I don't think it has very healthy play patterns associated with it.
if you could guarantee one card in your opening hand, what card would it be, and what combo deck would you play with it?
Probably the One Ring and Key and Wheel. Those games just play out really, really well.
Man, I was gonna guess either Fast Bond or Tolarian Academy, but the One Ring, really?
Yeah, it's super messed up. You have a lot of fast mana. You don't have many rings in the deck. So,
Yeah, okay.
yeah, I'd go with Ring for sure.
Cool.
Great answers. Well, look, thank you very much for joining us, Max. It was great to have you and hear your expertise and insight.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a blast. This is an awesome initiative. Really looking forward to hearing some of the episodes.
Yeah, thanks for that. Look, while we're on that, guys, if you're hearing this episode, do two things for us. One, subscribe to the YouTube channel so you get updates when more episodes come out. And if you've got a lot of experience and have had some success with a deck or an archetype and you want to chat to us, please reach out to myself or Lime, and we'd love to have you on.